You checked your account this morning. Not because something was wrong, just because. And everything was fine. The balance was where it should be. The bills are covered. There's money in savings. By almost any reasonable measure, you are okay. And yet, there's this low hum, this background noise that doesn't quite go away. You closed the app and went about your day, but part of your mind stayed there, running numbers you've already run, rechecking math that already checked out. You've had the thought before, why can't I just relax about this? Maybe you've even said it out loud, to a partner, to yourself in the car on the way home. And the strange part, the part you don't fully understand yet, is that the anxiety isn't louder when things are bad. It's loudest when things are fine. Let's establish something before we go any further. You are not careless with money. If anything, you're the one everyone else calls responsible. But when people ask when they have a financial question, they're a little embarrassed not to already know the answer to. You've educated yourself. You pay attention. You know roughly what you should be doing, and for the most part, you do it. You're not someone who ignores the numbers. If anything, you're someone who looks at the numbers more than most people would consider healthy. You didn't arrive at financial stability by accident. It came from discipline, from decisions that required you to say no to yourself, to convenience, to things you actually wanted. That kind of restraint takes real effort, and it compounds quietly over time, the same way interest does. And you've probably also noticed that the people around you, some of whom are significantly less careful, less organized, less thoughtful about any of this, seem to carry the whole thing more lightly than you do. That's worth sitting with for a moment, because you're not imagining it. The weight you feel isn't a symptom of doing something wrong, and it isn't evidence of some hidden financial disaster waiting to surface. It's something else entirely. Something that developed precisely because of how seriously you take all of this, because of how responsible you've been, because of how much you've trained yourself to pay attention. The vigilance that helped you build stability, it didn't stop when the stability arrived. And that's where this gets complicated. There's a psychological pattern that operates quietly underneath a lot of financial anxiety. It doesn't have a flashy name. It doesn't get discussed in personal finance content because it isn't really a personal finance problem. It's a vigilance trap. Here's what that means in plain terms. At some point, probably during a period when money was genuinely tight or unpredictable, or when you made a mistake that cost you, your mind learned something. It learned that paying close attention to your finances was the thing that kept bad outcomes at bay. And that was true. It worked. The attention, the monitoring, the constant low-level awareness, it helped. You caught things. You corrected course. You stayed ahead of problems. So your brain did exactly what it's designed to do. It noted the behavior that led to safety, and it reinforced it. The problem is that the reinforcement didn't come with an off switch. The monitoring that protected you during hard times became a background process that simply kept running, even after the hard times passed, even after you built savings, even after the picture stabilized. Your financial behavior adapted to reality. Your nervous system didn't get the memo. And this is where intelligence makes it worse, not better. Because when you're intelligent, you're very good at finding reasons to keep watching. You can construct a perfectly rational case for why right now isn't the time to relax. Interest rates, job market uncertainty, inflation, the cost of a single unexpected medical event.
You know enough to know that stability is not the same as security, and you know enough to generate a credible threat at almost any moment. The vigilance sustains itself on your own knowledge. It uses your awareness as fuel. And so the alert stays on, the monitoring continues, and the stability you've worked toward, the thing that was supposed to bring relief, quietly becomes just another data point to track. To understand why this is so hard to simply decide your way out of, you have to understand the mechanism underneath it. This isn't about mindset. It's not about gratitude or perspective or learning to appreciate what you have. Those things might be valuable in their own right, but they don't touch what's actually happening here. What's happening is this. Your nervous system, not your rational mind, but the older, faster part of your brain that handles threat detection, operates on pattern recognition, not present tense reality. It doesn't ask, is there a threat right now? It asks, does this situation resemble a situation where there once was a threat? And financial uncertainty, for most people who've experienced it, leaves a very clear pattern in the system. The feeling of checking and not knowing. The feeling of a number being smaller than it should be. The feeling of, what if this gets worse? Those feelings get encoded not just as memories, but as triggers. So when you open your banking app today, you're not just opening your banking app today. You're also, somewhere beneath conscious awareness, re-entering a situation that once felt dangerous, and the system responds accordingly. It sends a signal. The signal feels like alertness or low-grade anxiety or the urge to look again. And you respond to that signal by looking again, by running the numbers again, by checking. And here's the loop. You check, you feel momentarily reassured, but reassurance, real, lasting reassurance, doesn't come. Because the checking behavior itself is telling your nervous system this is something worth checking. The very act of monitoring confirms to the threat detection system that monitoring is necessary. So the anxiety doesn't resolve. It pauses, briefly, then resets, and you check again. This is the loop. Perceived threat, monitoring behavior, temporary relief, reset, perceived threat again, around and around, with the interval getting shorter over time. The system that once protected you is now protecting you from nothing. But it doesn't know that. It was never designed to know that. It was designed to keep you alive, not to evaluate whether the danger has passed. And so it keeps running the only program it has. What makes this particularly difficult is that the loop is silent and automatic. You don't experience it as a loop. You experience it as a reasonable response to an uncertain world. Because you're not wrong that uncertainty exists. You're just operating a threat response system that was calibrated for a different moment, and it hasn't been recalibrated since. The rational mind gets recruited to justify what the nervous system is already doing. You don't decide to worry. You find reasons why the worry is warranted. And because you're intelligent, and because the world genuinely is uncertain, you're rarely short of reasons. This is where it starts, but what it costs you doesn't show up on any spreadsheet.
Let's slow down and get specific. Because this pattern doesn't announce itself dramatically. It doesn't look like a breakdown or a crisis. It looks like Tuesday. It looks like this. A work conversation goes well. A project lands. There's a bonus or a raise or a contract that closes. Good news, objectively. And for a moment, a brief moment, you feel it. Relief or satisfaction or something close to it. And then, within a few hours, sometimes within the same hour, the mind has already moved, already found the next variable to account for, already begun calculating what this means for the next 6 months, the next year, the next potential disruption. The good news didn't land. It passed through. Then there's the goalpost. You get to a number, a savings number, an income number, the net worth number that you once told yourself would feel like enough, and you reach it. and you notice almost immediately that the threshold has moved, that enough has quietly become something slightly larger than what you have now, the goalpost relocated without a conscious decision to move it. You tell yourself, well, it just makes sense to have more cushion. And it does make sense, except it made sense at the last number too, and the one before that. You reach the stability, and it feels like maintenance. Then it becomes behavioral. You're on a vacation, one you planned carefully, one you can comfortably afford, one you saved for specifically. And on the second day, while your family is at the pool, you find yourself in the hotel room with your phone open, reviewing your credit card transactions. Not because anything is wrong, just to confirm, just to feel like you have a handle on it. You close the app, you go back downstairs, but part of you stayed in the room. The vacation is happening. You're not fully in it. And then it becomes about identity. You're in a conversation with someone your age, a friend, a colleague, and they mention something offhand about money, a trip they're planning, something they bought without what seems like much deliberation, and you notice something in yourself, not quite envy, more like confusion or low-level resentment, because you make a comparable income and you would never allow yourself that kind of ease. And you can't tell if you're being responsible or if something has gone wrong somewhere. That question is the tell, because you've been asking it quietly for a while now.
The cost of this pattern is almost impossible to see while it's happening. That's what makes it worth talking about. It doesn't show up as a financial loss. Your accounts look fine. Your decisions, evaluated on paper, are often quite good. There's no obvious damage to point to. What builds instead is something quieter, slower, and in some ways more significant. The first thing is absence. Not absence of money, absence of yourself, from your own life, from experiences that were supposed to mean something, from moments that passed while part of your attention was somewhere else, running background calculations, maintaining the watch. You were at the dinner, you were on the trip, you were in the conversation, but you weren't fully there. And those moments don't hold the same weight in memory when you were only partially present for them. Over years, that adds up to something, a kind of dimness around experiences that were supposed to matter. The second cost is a specific quiet variety of resentment, not toward other people, or not primarily, toward the situation itself, toward money in a way that feels irrational but is very real, because you've done everything right. You've been careful, you've been responsible, and you're still not free of it, still there every morning waiting. That gap between what the discipline was supposed to deliver and what it actually feels like can quietly hollow out the motivation to keep going. Not in a dramatic way, just a slow erosion of the sense that any of this is leading to somewhere good. The third cost is harder to name. It's what happens to your baseline. When vigilance is the constant state, the nervous system adjusts. What once felt like relief starts feeling like neutral. What once felt like neutral starts feeling like something might be off. The bar for feeling okay quietly rises because okay is always contingent on the next check, the next number, the next confirmation that everything is still fine. And the things that used to restore you, a weekend off, a quiet evening, a period without financial decisions to make, they stop working as well as they once did. The system doesn't fully power down anymore. The hum doesn't go quiet. The rest doesn't actually rest you, and you go back into your week carrying something the weekend was supposed to clear. This isn't about drama. It's not about collapse or crisis. It's about a very slow, very quiet accumulation of a life that's half-lived, not because of failure, not because of bad decisions, but because the alert stayed on after the emergency passed, and no one told you that was something that could happen. The years it costs aren't the years you can see on a spreadsheet. They're the years you were there, but not quite present. The years you were stable, but not quite free.
Think about the last time money felt light. Not non-existent. Light. Easy. Not a source of low-grade background noise that you just learned to stop noticing. If you're struggling to locate that memory, if it's been long enough that the feeling itself is a little vague, that's worth sitting with. Not as a problem to solve, just as information. Because the absence of that feeling didn't happen all at once. It faded gradually, the way light does at the end of the day, and you adjusted. And at some point, the adjustment became the new normal, and you stopped noticing what was gone. There are some things worth asking yourself, not to find the right answer, just to notice what's actually there. When something financially good happens, a raise, a windfall, a bill that comes in lower than expected, how long does the relief actually last? Not the intellectual acknowledgement that it's good news, the felt sense of it. Does it reach you? Does it stay? When you imagine a version of your life where money genuinely wasn't a source of background noise, where you moved through your days without the low-level monitoring, does that feel like something reasonable to want? Or does it feel slightly irresponsible, a little naive? Notice that. Think about the financial floor you've built. When you look at those numbers, do you feel what you expected to feel when you were working toward them? Or has the feeling relocated somewhere past the next milestone, the next threshold you haven't reached yet? And this one, if someone asked you to describe your relationship with money in 3 words, not what you do with it, but how it feels, what would those words be? Don't think about what they should be. Notice what they actually are. The gap between what you expected financial stability to feel like and what it actually feels like, that gap is real information. It's not a character flaw. It's not ingratitude. It's the shape of something that's been running quietly for a long time.
Here's what's true about patterns that operate beneath conscious awareness. The moment you can see them, actually see them, not just intellectually recognize them, but observe them running in real time, they begin to lose a degree of their automaticity. Not because awareness fixes anything, it doesn't, but because a behavior you can observe is different from a behavior you're inside of. When you're inside the loop, it just feels like reality. It feels like a rational response to how the world is. When you can step back and watch the loop, as a pattern with a shape, a rhythm, a predictable sequence, it becomes something other than the truth. It becomes something you can name. And naming matters more than it seems like it should, not as a therapeutic exercise, but as a practical act of creating distance between you and the automatic process. The next time you notice the urge to check, when everything is fine, when you already know the numbers, when there is no new information to gather, there's a possibility that you'll also notice what's happening, that the checking isn't about information, that it's the loop doing what it does. You might still check, probably will at first, but you'll be watching the pattern while it runs, rather than simply being it. And that distance, small as it is not nothing. It's the only place where something different becomes possible. Not through effort or discipline or deciding to feel differently, but through the quiet act of being able to see what's been invisible. The vigilance isn't a character flaw, it's a learned response that outlasted the conditions that created it. That's all it is.
and things that were learned can, slowly, be seen for what they are. You built something real. The stability you have didn't come from luck. It came from sustained attention and real sacrifice. That's worth acknowledging plainly without immediately adding a but. And here's what this video has been quietly sitting with the whole time. You don't need to dismantle your discipline, but you may need to question what it's costing you. Not the discipline itself, but the version of it that kept running after you no longer needed it as desperately. The version that stopped protecting you and started simply persisting. The financial picture may be fine. The internal experience of that financial picture, that's the part that deserves some honest attention. Not urgency, not a plan, just attention. If something in the last 20 minutes felt more precise than usual, if a moment landed in a way that was less like hearing an idea and more like recognizing something you already knew, it might be worth spending a little time with that recognition rather than moving past it. The comments section is a quiet place to put it if you want to. You don't have to frame it as a problem. Sometimes the most honest thing is just, I see this in myself. That's enough for now.